In the heart of Amucha village, where traditions run deep and drums tell stories, the matchmaking dance festival was meant to unite, but for Ama and Bola, it became a battleground of trust and betrayal. This is a story of love, betrayal, and redemption in one African village. The drums thundered through the evening air, louder than Bola's thoughts but not loud enough to drown them out. Lanterns glowed softly in the festival square, their warm light dancing on colorful market booths and eager faces. The scent of grilled meat mingled with the sweet smell of palm wine, wrapping the night in an aroma of celebration. But for Bola, it wasn't a celebration. He stood at the edge of the square, his tall frame rigid against the backdrop of excited dancers and busy stands. His agbada swayed lightly in the evening breeze. He looked every bit the image of confidence, broad shoulders, sharp jawline, and intelligent eyes that often drew admiration. But inside, his thoughts turned, each one heavier than the last. "This is your year, Bola," his grandmother had said earlier that evening, her voice as firm as the grip of her walking stick. "A man without a wife is like a river without water. Go, Bola. Go to the matchmaking festival. You'll thank me one day." Her words echoed in his mind, tightening the knot in his chest. Bola sighed deeply, adjusting his cuffs as his dark eyes scanned the vibrant scene before him. Women in vibrant wrappers hurried about, their laughter mixing with the rhythmic pounding of drums. Children ran between market booths, their giggles ringing like tiny bells. Men gathered in animated groups, gesturing and shouting good-naturedly as the festival pulsed with life. To everyone else, this was a night of joy, a celebration of tradition and love. To Bola, it was a trap. He wasn't here to find a wife. He was here because of his grandmother. And then he saw her. At first, she was just another figure in the crowd. But as his gaze lingered, her presence demanded his attention. She stood apart from the others, wrapped in vibrant orange and gold. Her head tie was tied with precision, framing her face like a queen's crown. Her posture was poised, exuding quiet confidence, but there was something else, something more. A defiance. A silent declaration that she didn't quite belong here either. Their eyes met. Just for a moment. The laughter and music around them faded, the glowing square blurred, and all Bola could feel was a single, unspoken question. Who was she? Ama adjusted her geli, her fingers trembling slightly as she tugged at the edges to ensure it sat perfectly on top of her head. The vibrant orange and gold fabric shimmered softly under the night light, complementing her deep brown complexion. Tonight, the matchmaking dance festival felt heavier than it ever had before, like something was about to shift in her world, though she couldn't yet name what. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, sharp and unyielding, "You're 21 now, Ama. You've built your business, you've made us proud, but life isn't meant to be lived alone. This matchmaking festival is your chance." Ama had rolled her eyes that morning, brushing her mother off with practiced ease. But now, standing amidst the festival's vibrant chaos, those words pressed down on her chest like a weight. Her independence had been hard-won, like weaving delicate fabric from frayed threads. She'd faced whispers from the villagers before, a woman with no husband? What's she waiting for? But Ama had always kept her head high, even when the weight of their judgment pressed hard against her shoulders. Could she risk unraveling everything she had built? The square pulsed with life. Vendors shouted jovially, holding up baskets woven with intricate patterns and jewelries that sparkled. The drummers struck their instruments with fervor, the rhythm reverberating in her chest. The aroma of grilled fish mingled with the earthy scent of roasted yams and freshly cut herbs, wrapping the festival in a warm embrace of familiarity. But Ama felt disconnected, as though this energy was meant for someone else. She moved cautiously through the crowd, her posture poised but her steps deliberate, avoiding the curious glances cast her way. Stopping at a stand selling coral necklaces, she ran her fingers over the smooth beads, their texture cool and familiar. The vendor, an elderly woman with kind eyes, smiled warmly. "This one, my daughter, will make you shine even brighter," she said, holding up a delicate string of coral. Ama nodded politely, but her mind was elsewhere. She could feel the weight of someone's gaze. Turning slightly, her eyes scanned the crowd until they locked onto him. He stood at the edge of the square, tall and broad-shouldered, his agbada glinting softly under the lanterns. His dark, almond-shaped eyes held hers for a moment too long, piercing yet calm, like he could see past her guarded exterior. Ama felt her breath catch, the intensity of his gaze pulling her in, before she quickly looked away. Her heart beat faster, as though it knew something she didn't. Adjusting her geli again, she stepped deeper into the crowd, blending into the shadows near the edge of the square. But no matter how far she moved, she couldn't shake the weight of his eyes, or the question they seemed to ask. Who was he? Bola walked reluctantly through the lively festival ground. The air buzzed with energy, drummers beat out rhythms that thundered in his chest, lanterns glowed softly, and vendors called out, displaying their goods. The aroma of grilled meat and roasted plantains wrapped around him, tempting his senses. Laughter spilled from the crowd as people moved around, their joy uncontainable. But Bola barely noticed any of it. His grandmother's words from earlier rang in his mind, "A man without a wife is a tree without roots. Find your wife, Bola. Or you'll regret it." He sighed and adjusted the cuffs of his agbada. Though he looked calm on the outside, inside, he felt disconnected, as if the lively scene wasn't meant for him. His eyes moved across the square, not looking for anything in particular, when he bumped into someone. The moment happened so fast, a soft gasp, the splash of liquid, and then silence. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Bola said quickly, his voice full of concern. A drink in her hand had splashed onto her bright orange and gold wrapper, leaving a dark stain. He fumbled for his handkerchief and held it out to her. "Here, please." The woman turned sharply, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, everything around them, the drumming, the laughter, the flickering lanterns, seemed to stop. Her gaze was sharp and steady, but her features carried a warmth that drew him in. She was stunning, her geli tied like a crown that framed her glowing face. "It's fine," Ama said, brushing at the stain on her wrapper. Her voice was calm, but there was a flicker of annoyance in her expression. "But maybe next time, watch where you're going." Bola chuckled nervously. "Noted." "I'm Bola," he said, offering her the handkerchief again. Ama hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing his briefly. That brief touch felt warmer than it should, lingering in the air between them. "I'm Ama," she replied, her voice firm but smooth. Her name seemed to fit her perfectly, and Bola couldn't help but repeat it. "Ama," he said softly. "It suits you." Her lips quirked slightly, and her eyebrow lifted with a mix of amusement and skepticism. "Well, Bola," she said, her tone light but steady, "if this is how you introduce yourself, you might need to work on your timing." Bola laughed, the sound deep and warm. "Fair point. Though, for what it's worth, it got you to talk to me." Ama shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Don't push your luck." The moment hung between them, charged with something neither could name. Ama handed the handkerchief back, her fingers brushing his once more. "Thanks," she said simply, her tone brisk again. "Try not to spill on anyone else." With that, she turned and walked away, her wrapper flowing behind her like a flame moving through the night. Bola stood there, watching her disappear into the crowd. His heart thundered in time with the drums, but this time, it wasn't the rhythm that moved him. He hadn't expected much from this festival, not joy, not connection, and certainly not her. But in that fleeting moment, something had shifted. Who was Ama? And why did it feel like she had just sparked something he couldn't ignore? The festival's lively energy carried on into the evening, the rhythm of the drums pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the stars. Lanterns swayed gently in the cool breeze, their soft light illuminating the colorful fabrics and joyful faces in the crowd. But for Bola and Ama, the world had shifted. Their brief encounter had planted a seed, of curiosity, of connection, that neither could ignore, even as they drifted into separate corners of the festival square. Ama lingered near a jewelry stand, her fingers brushing absent-mindedly over a string of coral beads. The vendor spoke warmly about the piece, but Ama wasn't listening. Her mind replayed the moment with Bola, his steady gaze, his warm laughter, the way his apology felt genuine, almost endearing. She frowned, willing herself to shake off the memory. She hadn't come here for this. She wasn't here for him. But she couldn't deny it, there was something about him that lingered, like a note in a song that refused to fade. Unknown to her, across the square, two men watched her intently, each for their own reason. Chaik stood in the shadows, leaning casually against a tree, but his eyes burned with an intensity that betrayed his calm posture. He had heard whispers of Ama's attendance at the festival and decided to come, convinced he could reclaim what he believed was his. Seeing her now, draped in orange and gold, her poise unshaken, only fueled his possessive determination. "She's still mine," Chaik muttered under his breath, his jaw tightening. He remembered the way she used to look at him, with trust, admiration. That was before the lies, before she had discovered the betrayals he'd so carefully hidden. He clenched his fists. She had left him, but in his mind, she hadn't truly moved on. And if she had? He would make her see that no one could replace him. Nearby, Yemi's gaze shifted between Ama and Bola, his expression darkening. Bola's cousin had spent years in his shadow, silently resenting his easy confidence and the admiration he commanded without effort. Seeing Bola with Ama, watching her laugh, even briefly, in his presence, felt like the final straw. "He gets everything," Yemi muttered bitterly, his fists curling. But not this time. As the night deepened, the drums grew louder, summoning the crowd to the bonfire for the evening storytelling. The flames leapt high into the night sky, casting flickering shadows over the square. Families and friends gathered around, their faces glowing in the firelight. But Chaik and Yemi lingered at the edges, their resentment pulling them together like a shared wound. Yemi approached Chaik, his steps deliberate, his voice low but firm. "You're here for Ama, aren't you?" Chaik straightened, his sharp features catching the firelight as he regarded Yemi with guarded interest. "And what if I am?" Yemi smirked, his eyes narrowing. "I can help you." Chaik raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "And why would you do that?" "Because I want Bola to lose," Yemi said bluntly, his voice carrying a bitterness that needed no explanation. "You get Ama. I get to see him fall. It's a win for both of us." Chaik considered this for a moment, his lips curling into a sly smile. "Go on." Yemi leaned closer, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Bola's reputation is spotless, but no one's above suspicion. We spread a rumor, something that'll make Ama question him, make her see he's not who she thinks he is." Chaik nodded slowly, the gears turning in his mind. "And when she doubts him, I'll be there to remind her of what we had." "It's perfect," Yemi said, a twisted grin spreading across his face. "And when this festival ends, Bola won't be the man everyone looks up to anymore." As the two men melted back into the shadows, their plan began to take shape, fueled by jealousy and pride. The bonfire's flames crackled loudly, the sound mingling with the drums as the festival continued to pulse with life, unaware of the storm brewing on its edges. Ama stood near the fire, her expression calm but her thoughts far away. Across the square, Bola lingered on the outskirts, his gaze occasionally drifting in her direction. Neither could see the threads of deception being woven around them, but the warmth of the fire seemed to hint at what was to come, a test of trust and truth that neither of them could avoid. The night sky exploded with bursts of color as fireworks illuminated the village square, their reflections shimmering in the wide-eyed gazes of the crowd. Children squealed with delight, pointing at the bright reds, greens, and golds that painted the heavens. Beneath the spectacle, the festival roared on, drums pounding in a rhythm that seemed to pulse in every heartbeat. The bonfire crackled, its flames leaping high into the night, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Ama stood at the edge of the square, the glow of the fire lighting the gold accents in her orange wrapper. She watched the fireworks, her expression calm but distant. Her thoughts drifted to Bola, his deep laugh, his steady gaze. There had been something about him, something that unsettled and intrigued her in equal measure. She shook her head slightly, brushing the thoughts away. This night was about surviving the festival, not dwelling on fleeting moments with strangers. On the other side of the square, Bola felt a similar unease. The celebration was a blur around him, dancers twirling near the bonfire, drummers playing with fevered intensity, the aroma of grilled meat wafting through the air. But his thoughts were elsewhere. He adjusted his igbada, stealing a glance across the crowd toward Ama. She stood out effortlessly, her poised presence drawing his attention like a magnet. He wanted to speak to her again, to know more about the woman who had walked into his thoughts and refused to leave. The drumming grew louder, calling the villagers toward the center of the square. Elders, their voices strong and commanding, announced the matchmaking dance. Couples were encouraged to step into the circle, their movements guided by the rhythm of the music. Laughter and cheers rippled through the crowd as villagers nudged hesitant participants forward. Before either of them could object, Bola and Ama found themselves gently pushed into the circle by enthusiastic onlookers. Ama turned to protest, but the crowd's laughter drowned her out. She glanced at Bola, who gave her a sheepish grin. "Looks like we're stuck," he said, his tone light. Ama sighed, a flicker of amusement softening her expression. "Try to keep up, then." The drummers increased their tempo, and the crowd clapped in rhythm, their energy infectious. Bola and Ama moved cautiously at first, their steps hesitant and unsure. But as the music swelled, their movements began to align. Ama spun gracefully, her orange wrapper flowing like a flame, and Bola found himself matching her pace, his broad frame moving with surprising ease. "You're not a bad dancer," Ama teased, her eyes sparkling as she caught his gaze. Bola chuckled, his grin widening. "I'll take that as a compliment." The space between them seemed to shrink as they danced. The cheers of the crowd, the crackling of the bonfire, even the thunder of the drums faded into the background. For a moment it was just them, two strangers moving in harmony, their connection undeniable. Then, like a crack in the surface of calm water, a voice shattered the moment. "Ama," Chaik called smoothly, stepping into the circle. "I've been looking for you." Ama's smile faded, her movements slowing as she turned to face him. "Chaik," she said, her tone clipped. "What are you doing here?" Chaik ignored her question, his sharp gaze sliding toward Bola. "And who is this JJC?" he said, using the slang for "Johnny just come," a patronizing term for newcomers. Bola straightened, his expression calm but firm. "I'm Bola." "And you are?" "A close friend," Chaik replied, his smile thin and cold. "Ama and I have history." Ama's jaw tightened. "That history is over, Chaik. Leave me alone." Chaik, undeterred, extended a hand toward her. "One dance, Ama. For old time's sake." Before she could respond, Bola stepped forward, his voice steady. "She's already dancing with me." The tension between the three was palpable, drawing the attention of nearby onlookers. The drummers faltered briefly, their rhythm wavering as the crowd's focus shifted. Chaik's confident smile faltered under Bola's unwavering gaze, but before he could respond, an elder's voice rose above the murmurs. "The next round begins now," the elder announced, drawing the crowd's attention back to the dance. Bola extended a hand to Ama, his expression earnest. "Shall we?" Ama hesitated, her gaze flickering between the two men. Then, with a defiant lift of her chin, she placed her hand in Bola's. "Let's go." They stepped back into the circle, the drums picking up their pace. The crowd cheered, clapping and singing as Bola and Ama moved together once more. Their steps grew bolder, their rhythm perfectly in sync, as though they had danced together 100 times before. The firelight danced in their eyes, illuminating the spark between them. On the edge of the square, Chaik watched, his expression darkening. His fists clenched at his sides, his mind racing with thoughts of retribution. Meanwhile, Yemi lingered in the shadows, his jealousy simmering as he observed the scene. The two men, consumed by their grievances, shared a single thought: this wasn't over. Yemi found Chaik again. He leaned closer, his words laced with venom. "We spread a rumor, one that no one can ignore. Something that makes Ama think twice about Bola, something that shakes the respect everyone has for him." Chaik's mind worked quickly, piecing the plan together. "Like what?" "Something simple," Yemi said. "We'll say Bola's promised to another woman, a girl from a neighboring village. That he got her pregnant and left her behind. It's believable enough to spread, and the elders will carry it to everyone." Chaik let out a low chuckle, his eyes gleaming. "And when Ama hears it, she'll see Bola for what he really is, or at least, what she thinks he is." "Exactly," Yemi said, his grin twisted with satisfaction. "And when she doubts him, you'll be there to pick up the pieces." The two men shook hands, their alliance forged in envy and pride. As they parted ways, the flickering light of the bonfire caught their shadows, distorting their figures like the dark intentions that now bound them. Ama lingered at the edge of the square, the flickering bonfire casting golden hues over her orange and gold wrapper. She traced the cool beads of her coral necklace, her mind replaying the moments she'd shared with Bola. His voice, steady and sure as he defended her against Chaik's arrogance, lingered in her thoughts. It was unexpected, and it had stirred something in her, a sense of safety she hadn't known she was searching for. She glanced back toward the crowd, catching sight of Bola on the other side of the square. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and a warmth spread through her chest. But just as quickly, she looked away, unsure of what it meant. Bola stood at the edge of the crowd, his thoughts a mix of confusion and curiosity. Ama's presence was magnetic, drawing him in despite himself. He had come to the festival out of duty, but now, it felt like there was more to it, more to her. Unaware of the storm brewing, he watched the firelight flicker over the crowd, his mind turning over the day's events. Chaik and Yemi, having forged their alliance earlier, moved separately through the festival, their plan already set into motion. Each man played his part with practiced ease, their words like seeds of doubt scattered among the unsuspecting crowd. Chaik lingered near the bonfire, his voice low but deliberate as he spoke to a group of women. "It's such a shame about Bola," he said, shaking his head as though reluctant to continue. "I didn't want to say anything, but they say he's already promised to another woman. A girl from a neighboring village. A child is involved too. He also got another woman pregnant in the city. Imagine the heartbreak." The women gasped, their curiosity piqued, and the story began to spread. Nearby, Yemi whispered the same story to a group of elders, his tone measured and serious. "I didn't want to say anything, but it's not right for the village to be kept in the dark. Bola's been hiding this for too long." The elders exchanged troubled glances, their disapproval growing with each word. The rumor spread like wildfire, fueled by the villagers' love for gossip. By morning, whispers of Bola's supposed betrayal had reached every corner of the festival, casting a shadow over the vibrant celebration. As Ama wandered through the crowd, fragments of conversations reached her ears, each one cutting deeper than the last. "Did you hear about Bola? They say he's promised to another woman, left her with a child. Who would have thought?" Ama's steps slowed, her chest tightening as the words wrapped around her like a vine. She paused near a stall selling handwoven baskets, her fingers brushing the intricate patterns as she tried to steady herself. Could it be true? Had she misjudged Bola so completely? Her gaze drifted across the square, landing on Bola. He stood near the riverbank, his broad frame silhouetted against the lantern-lit backdrop. Their eyes met briefly, and for a moment, she searched his expression for answers. But instead of clarity, she saw concern, and something else she couldn't quite name. She quickly looked away, her heart caught in a storm of doubt and confusion. Bola stood near the riverbank, his hands resting in his pockets as he stared at the rippling water. The festive energy of the square felt distant tonight, replaced by sidelong glances and hushed whispers that carried on the wind. Something was wrong. The usual warmth of the villagers had turned cold, their cheerful greetings replaced with cautious smiles and knowing looks. He caught sight of Ama in the distance. Her poised posture belied the tension in her expression, and he felt a pang of unease. Had she heard the whispers too?